Good morning. So I thought I would just kind of walk through what I normally do for a weekly scheduling session. And so this is just a plain Excel document. And so I've got it, and I will share this with you um, so that you have a copy of it. So when you start next year, you'll want to change all these dates, though, that you'll have to do manually. You'll have to come in and put the dates in manually in here. So what I do first is I go through and I put all the games in, and I try to color code stuff. So you'll come up with your own color coordinating if you want to, but that just helps me at a glance kind of see what's going on. So I've kind of got all the colors in here, I think. These weeks up top are kind of a typical week that is pretty filled with stuff. Um, so, um, like next week, we've got our scheduling done. These represent practices at the hip. This represents a practice in Virginia because we have the Bantam B team with Virginia this year, but we always do have our girls teams are with Virginia as well, so we've got 10U and 12U to track there. We have high school boys and girls games either at the hip or in Hoyt Lakes, so I have color coordinating for them. This is a hip game. For the high school, I put in the black. If there's a game in Hoyt Lakes, I usually put it in purple, just because I was running out of colors. So if there is a game, whether it's boys or girls, it's in purple if it's in Hoyt Lakes. If there is a game in Hoyt Lakes that's a youth game, that is in green. The Rangers games are in red, and you can look this over closer if you want to pause the recording or whatever. If I scroll over here, there's this darker blue, which represents a Virginia game. And then the gray is away games. And the reason I track all of that is because if I need to reschedule something, I need to know where the squirts are at any given moment. I need to know, where each team is. So I track their away games as well as their home games in Hoyt Lakes, as well as our combo teams and their games elsewhere as well. So again, that's mainly for just overall scheduling purposes. I might have, a new, not even a new organization, but someone may contact me to say, hey, let's schedule a game. And so I've kind of got to know all of the schedules. So here's a week. I'm about to do December 10th's week. And so here's a week where just the games have been entered so far. And we'll do the practices here in just a second. All right, so you probably noticed on this side over here, kind of have a split screen going here. This is the email that I get from Craig. So both Chrissy Bardovich, who does scheduling for Virginia, and myself, we have Craig schedule first. So sometimes that's the holdup. He usually just does it a week in advance. So I just got an email today for next week's. So a lot of times the email will come on Thursday. I need to have it back to him, as soon as possible. Sometimes it doesn't get back to him until the following Monday, but he confirms everything by Tuesday. So that would be, so let me just think about the dates here for a second. So today is November 29th, and I just got the email from him for the December 10th scheduling. He will not confirm all of it until Tuesday, December 4th at the earliest. Sometimes it is Wednesday, December 5th, the week prior. And then once those things are confirmed, I can get them onto the website and start communicating that information out. Sometimes I send it out even earlier, knowing that I might have to make changes or adjustments just depending on what happens in the meantime. So the reason that we always have Craig schedule first is because he's scheduling 2 high school teams. So his ice time is sort of the hardest to come by. And that is certainly true until he gets the Gilbert bubble open. So once the bubble opens, then there are more time slots for like our combo teams, and it does free up again. So it kind of goes like this. Early in October, the ice time is much more readily available at both facilities, the HIP and in Hoyt Lakes. Then the beginning, about the end of October, beginning of November, it gets a little more hairy because the girls' team starts practicing, high school team. And then once the boys' team adds in times for their practices, and the girls are also starting games around that same time, as well as trying to get the Pee Wee and the Bantams on the ice as much as possible for the tryout and the split separation period. So that's probably one of the toughest times is when everybody sort of ramps up and gets started. And then, of course, that first week of November is when we have our youngest groups start as well. In Eveleth, they start a little bit sooner than we do, but that's because they only get 1 or 2 times on the ice a week until the bubble opens. And so our squirts definitely get tons of ice time, more than our neighbors do, and so do our mites and our paps and termites as well. So the only one who maybe gets equivalent time is probably Virginia, because they have both rinks open all the time. And then Eveleth gets more equivalent time to us, to what we give our groups, once the bubble is open in Gilbert. But otherwise, the rest of the year, they're actually lagging behind us as far as ice time usually. So anyway, there's that little synopsis. So Craig sends me an email, and so now what I'll do is I'll start, just kind of reading through this and plugging in all the practice times. So December 10th, so I'm just going to go up here and copy this A practice time. I'm going to copy and paste, and then I'm going to change it to, he's got PWBs. And the PWB time is 7:45 to 9 at the hip. So that's the hip practice. He'd like to see the 12Us, the Bantam Bs, and the Bantam As. So most of the time we kind of flip-flop like this. So on Mondays, on the 3rd, I had the Peewees. This week we'll have the Bantams, and he'll be vice versa. So most of the time it kind of works that way in the schedule. So, excuse me, we got to put the 12Us in, and the Bantam Bs, and the Bantam As. So I know that the Bantam As, so now I have to start thinking about coaches' schedules. So Bantam Bs this year is Rob Ronning. He works for the State Department. Sometimes his schedule is flexible and can be, if he knows in advance. Otherwise, a 5:30 practice would be as early as they could go. And for the Bantam As, their coaches also work later. One of the coaches works until 7 p.m. in Virginia a lot of times, so like an 8 o'clock practice starting time is best for them. Of course, the other coach could always take practice if if that happens to be the case, and that's a day that John is working. So there's a little bit of that goes into it. 12U is a guy named Lyle, and also Willie Speltz is helping with that too as an assistant. And they really can't have a time before like 4 o'clock. 4:15 would even be better because they're in the same situation as us. Their school day ends at 3:10. So just kind of an idea about just sort of getting to know the coaches, what their schedules are like, what they do for work. And it can be a little awkward, but I do ask them, like, what do you do for a job? What's a good time? Like, what's the earliest you could be here? What's the latest you'd want to be on the ice? And I always make sure to say, okay, I'm going to try to honor that as best as I can. And I'll always sort of keep those things in mind. But, if something changes, you've got to let me know. And sometimes ice time is just really tough because we might have Rangers games going on, or I might not be able to honor that time all the time, So sometimes you just got to let them know they might be a little out of their comfort zone in terms of getting their optimal ice time, but we'll do the best that we can. Okay, so I'll come fill these in later. I have to see what else is going on the rest of the week. You can see that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are going to be quite a challenge this week because we've got Rangers games and a girls' high school game, which I'll talk about the girls' high school game right now. You can see that those times are at 5 and 7 because the team is coming from Pequot Lakes. So a lot of times, I'll just scroll up here, the games are at 5:30 and 7:30. You can see these games against North Shore were 5:30 and 7:30. And they were, this one is a little bit sooner. So what I was going to say about that, sorry, I just got a text at the same time, is that usually we can have like squeak in a session or two on the ice. We didn't necessarily that time, but with a 5 o'clock start, we've got to be off the ice by 4:45. So that means I could potentially put a 3:45 to 4:45 practice in, depending on the group. I try to never put like pops and termites then, because they need a lot of parent help. And if it's hard for a parent to be there at 3:45, and it means picking those kids up at the school, getting them there. The older groups are a lot better about carpooling, and the parents are a lot better about like letting go of a little bit of that I don't control, for lack of a better word, but you know, they're more willing to just let the kids carpool with someone else. So the older groups are easier to put in the early time slots like that, and we're only going to have one time slot here, and then this game isn't going to end till like 9:15, and so there'll be no more practice slots after that. So that day is pretty much out. For Rangers games now, we have been able to sort of squeak in a 5 to 6 p.m. practice, and then you've always got to allow 15 minutes in between. So the other one would be 3:45 to 4:45 on a normal day. But what's cool about this is that it's Wednesdays and we have early out. So if we only do a Mesabi East team here, that would work out nicely. But also Virginia and Evelyn are also out early on Wednesdays. So we could potentially, if we had to, schedule one of our older groups. But we typically try to stay away from Wednesdays because of all the church items going on. So this will most likely Wednesdays always be just a local, you know, Mesabi East team, none of the combo teams. So those could be our 2 times, but we could even give them a little bit longer, which with our older group, I do try to give them a little longer. So I'll probably try to give the squirts an hour and a half this day, and then an hour to like probably the pops and the termites, because sometimes really an hour is enough for those guys, and they're, you know, those little ones, and they're like, okay, I'm good. And we always want them not wanting to get off the ice and wanting to come back for more. Like, yep, sorry, you got to wait till the next practice. So hopefully that's the situation, you know, that we're creating. And the reason I skipped over the mites is because their head coach, Josh Barrett, is he works 10s Monday through Thursday, so he's in Virginia until 6 o'clock. So the earliest, and it's tough for him, is to schedule a practice that starts at 6:30, which is really, I mean, he's like straight from work right on the ice. So that's, I mean, not optimal for him, but I've talked to him a couple times and they're just glad to have the ice time, he said. So, okay, so that's going to be Wednesday. Getting back to Tuesday, sorry if I'm jumping around a little bit. We've got Evelyn has PBAs, and he's hoping to put the PBBs on early, but we already have a goalie session with PD that day, so I'll just have to tell him, nope, sorry. The Bantam Bs have a game, and then the BAs can go later, which fits the schedule for the coaches as well. So I'm going to put this as 8:15 to 9:45, and I'm going to do a whole hour and a half there because they might not actually get on the ice at 8:15. It might be more like 8:30 before they get on the ice. I'm just going to try to cinch it up as much as possible, as close to that game time as possible. And I better list this as 8:30 actually, because that game will probably take an hour and a half, which will be 8:15, and then we'll want to allow time for the Zamboni to go. All right, so that's kind of, you know, simple, fast scheduling. I'm not even going to say it in a nutshell. That is just like a little part of it, kind of the start to the week. And I will do another quick video on kind of the rest of it.